Good morning, everybody. Fergus Dolan here from NALA, the National Adult Literacy Agency. Delighted to have you here this morning for our webinar on growing family learning, lessons learned about family learning practices in ETBs, guidelines, case studies, and recommendations report. Our two facilitators this morning are Eleanor Neff and Toni. They're project workers on the Marking Progress NALA. So I'll hand you over to Eleanor and good luck.
Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning. I know we're all a bit weary of Zoom, so we appreciate you being here. So my name is Eleanor, and also my colleague Toni will be co-presenting with me today. So we've been working on the Marking Progress project for NALA for the last year. So I suppose the first thing really is, what is the Marking Progress project and what have we been doing? So throughout the course of the Further Education and Training Strategy 2014 to 2019, NALA was commissioned by SOLAS to complete a number of research projects. And these studies resulted in evidence-based guidelines on inclusion across 3 areas. So we had numeracy and the inclusion of people with intellectual disabilities in the adult literacy service, and of course, family literacy. And we had as our particular focus the research into family literacy. And what we've been doing in the past year is trying to work collaboratively with interested ETBs to support them to know more about these guidelines and to also start planning ways to possibly implement these guidelines in a way that's going to be relevant in their local area. So just to say, you can see more on our webpage, which is currently hosted by NALA, and the link is up there, and Fergus can share this afterwards. Now, our outlines today, so what we're going to do in a minute, we're going to launch a Zoom poll and just do a family literacy health check. So just, I suppose, a gut response to how you think family literacy is doing in your area. Then we're going to go through the guidelines and share the insights that we have gathered from practitioners all across Ireland in the course of the past year. And when we are going through them, just anything that resonates with you may be noted down, because we're going to be doing an activity then in breakout rooms for about 10 minutes. And just for you thinking about how could the guidelines work in your context, and just creating a space for you to discuss family literacy in your area. And then a bit of feedback. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Toni to launch the Zoom poll and the health check on family literacy. So Toni, I'll leave you go there.
Okay, I'll just launch the poll now. It's just one question. How would you describe family literacy in your area? And you have a single choice. And the 4 choices are flourishing, doing well, doing okay, and could be better. So you should all be able to see it now at this stage.
Wow.
Okay, so I think has everybody. Okay, everybody has participated at that stage. So if you just give me a moment, sorry, I take a photograph of the poll. Very high tech.
And can everyone see the poll now as well, Toni, and the results?
And poll share results. There we go.
That's really interesting. You can see it's a real mixed bag. And I think that's what we found throughout the year as well, that, you know, it's just so dependent on where you are, what's happening in different ETBs, and it can have a real jagged profile, you know, within different ETBs, within different areas in the same ETB. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to share that. Toni, I'm going to pass over to you for the presenting, and if I'm not moving fast enough on the slides, just give a shout, okay?
Okay, fine. I'll just close the poll here.
Okay,
and then the next slide, yeah, the reports. Lovely, thanks, Eleanor. Okay, so these are the family literacy reports, and the reports were commissioned by SOLAS, the ETBI, and NALA, and they were written by Dr. Maggie Feely and Dr. Anne Hegarty. And the reports mark the first time that family literacy practice in ETBs were researched at national level in Ireland. They highlighted the immense commitment, creativity and skill in this area and the need to support it. The background research report was published alongside the shorter report and provides extra detail on the research findings that form the basis of the recommendations in the guidelines themselves. The link to the report is on the web page, and a bit of reading for Christmas for you. And the next thing, Eleanor, if you wouldn't mind. The next slide. Sorry.
There you go.
Okay, you're right. So the guidelines are divided into 3 separate areas or headings within the report. So the first section, taking time to think about family literacy, that's all about reflection areas for each provider to think about and talk about when they're developing a family learning strategy. And then the second section is about developing and delivering learner-centered programs, and that's about practice. I suppose what we call the meat and potatoes of the whole thing: the courses, the programs, publicity, recording and sharing of successes, and most importantly, ensuring that those with the greatest need get priority access to provision. So then our final and third group of guidelines, that's all about future proofing, about ensuring the ongoing stability and relevance of the provision, and gathering qualitative and quantitative data to illustrate the extent and the success of the work. So one of the key issues for everyone spoken to in connection with the report was well-resourced support for learners and staff, which I'm sure will be no surprise to any of you. The next slide, Eleanor, if you wouldn't mind. So what we've been doing, we have, including today, we've run 8 online workshops with over 101 participants, not including the people who've attended today. And participants are mainly from the 15 ETBs, but we've also had people from other organisations who are interested in family learning. So the participants have generally been a blend of family learning tutors, ALOs, we've had some AEOs, and again, others like homeschool liaison people who've had an interest in family learning. Workshops then were interactive to encourage participants to engage and to reflect on the guidelines. So this is back to you, Eleanor, I think, at this stage.
So these are the actual guidelines, and as Toni mentioned, like they're on NALA's website, they're also on our webpage as well. So we'll just step you through them, but as well the insights that we got from people working in the area all the time. So the first guideline is retain a learner-centered ethos that values parents' roles. And this was one that people felt was doing great. I mean, this is at the heart of the ETBs, honoring, you know, the learner. And I think in family literacy, it's particularly important because you're empowering parents to realize how important their role is as their child's teacher. And sometimes people really lack confidence about that. Then guideline 1.2, identify and agree terms used in family literacy strategies, just the actual language that's happening. And very important too, while we're working across ETBs, but also working with other organizations, and important as well for parents. And while this is a foundational step, few ETBs have actually had the time or the resources to do this work. One very positive example of this work happening, and which we shared with other ETBs, was from Limerick Care ETB. And they actually have developed a brochure, and it's on their website. And they promote family literacy, but also they really clarify the language around the family literacy. They talk about what does parent mean, and they widen that definition to include everyone who's involved in the care of a child. So this is really widening as well the opportunity for recruitment and impact. And it's really getting across to the schools what's happening with family literacy and what it is. Now, the focus on the value of learning relationships and resourcing this work. And of course, there was agreement all across the board. These learning relationships are key to family literacy. And I'm sure all of you here today know how important that is, to building on these relationships with other organizations. But at the same time, it's very challenging to implement. This takes time, it takes staff resources, and a lot of the time people are already under pressure. In fact, people are snowed under, especially at the moment. There's a lot going on. But the evidence is that this happens with the active support of an AEO. So when you have an AEO who is championing family literacy, that really makes a difference here. Another interesting finding was that during COVID, there was a real priority, well, we're still in it, there was a real priority though to stay connected with families, and new relationships with other organizations developed as everyone came together and responded to what was happening on the ground. And I suppose now is an opportunity to build on these, and you know, the learning care and these relationships really work. 1.4, celebrate achievements, learning and other achievements. Now, of course, this is happening, but it needs support at an organizational level as well, because quite often it's resting on the goodwill, the creativity of already overstretched individuals. And again, another thing that was coming to us in the online webinars, that it's really important to include parents in the planning phase of these celebrations. And it can be a key way through word of mouth and people talking about how positive this is, of reaching other parents who mightn't have engaged with the family learning. Now, I'm going to hand back over to you. So as I said, these are our first set of guidelines based around the reflection and the thinking. So I'll hand you over to Toni now for the next set of guidelines.
Okay, so the second set of guidelines, this part of the report looks at developing and delivering the family learning programs. Excuse me. So 2.1, provide a range of relevant and accessible courses for learners. There was a mixed response, and which we saw in our own poll there was a mixed response to this guideline, with those who had a well-developed family learning framework and collaborative relationships providing very positive feedback around the flexibility of the course designed to meet the needs of learners at local level. Others then reported that this guideline needed further work, as there were still barriers which may prevent learners from engaging with the courses. Now, obviously, during COVID, we have seen how creative and tailored responses were implemented nationwide. And we also saw how quickly and positively practitioners reacted to a very changed environment. We have seen great collaboration at local levels, which provided support to those most disadvantaged by the state. One resourced family learning online course provided free tablets to participants, and they also encouraged them to bring a friend, which increased participation numbers and engagement. And I have a link to that, and I'll put it in the chat when I finish talking. So then our second guideline is use a central repository of family literacy resources. And I think this will resonate with anybody who's been involved with family literacy for any length of time. There is a consensus that we need a central repository. There is a considerable amount of family learning resources available, but they're very spread out, and people have a tendency to feel that we're constantly reinventing the wheel. Many tutors are designing excellent programs, and they're often just used once. And an opportunity to share these resources would be beneficial to all of us involved in family learning, where the problem really is gathering this together, keeping it updated. This takes time and effort. And the question being asked, and we don't have an answer at the moment, is who will do this work? So then moving on to 2.3, prioritize access for learners with greatest need. Again, everybody agrees with this, but it seems to be one of the most difficult to achieve. It was identified that a longer engagement process is needed, and this needs resourcing. Participants felt that family learning programs are often slow to build momentum, and cancelling after a week or so, if the numbers are low, is actually self-defeating. Where family learning works well, it is given time. And apparently, well, something we all, I think, are aware of, is that insisting on minimum numbers of participants from day one was suggested as a sure way of ensuring that the program will actually collapse. So then if we move to 2.4, establish clear and agreed ways to measure and track success at local level. So this guideline was reported as not actually working very well. An identified challenge was the lack of a systematic approach in this area across various providers and within the ETBs. This takes time to solve, and participants in our workshops agreed that Evidence is vital. We want to influence policy. We want to be policy makers and not policy takers. We know what works on the ground, but it needs to be evidenced and fed upwards in a way that we can convince people, or in a way that is convincing, let's say. So then moving on to the final guideline here, involving family literacy tutors, organisers and learners at all phases in the design and promotion. This is the goal, yet learners are the ones who have the most power with their peers and can bring their own expertise and insights. They're often overlooked at the design planning stage of the process. And one suggestion was to encourage or to co-opt parents to act as family learning ambassadors. And there were also some suggestions around talking to parents about promotion of family learning programs, asking them things like, where do they go? What kind of places do they frequent? Where would they be most likely to see family learning promotion? And back to you again, Eleanor.
Thanks, Toni. And again, so I know there's a lot of information here from the guidelines. And again, as I was saying, just if there's anything jumping out that you do note it down, that might be handy in the breakout room. So anything just at I suppose an instinctual level, you're like, yeah, that's my center, or that's my local area. So we're on to the final third set of guidelines. And as Toni was saying earlier, these are really concerned with future proofing, with ensuring the ongoing stability of the provision. I suppose in ways, this set of guidelines, when we're working on the ground for practitioners and that, this can be one of the most challenging because we feel we've very little control here. They do really need the organizational support. So that was one of the things overall we found with this group of guidelines. Now, 3.1, remain familiar with and contribute to policy and research. And again, that can be a very challenging area when you're busy, when you're working with learners, when you're preparing classes. And sometimes I know policy would often go over my head, but really that is what's impacting us on the ground. And it is what's impacting our learners. And as Toni said, I suppose it's been trying to be policy makers to feed information up rather than being policy takers. So it's not something coming down on top of us. And just being aware of what's going on and what is actually happening. Like, it's again a challenging area for many, again, time, resources, but just important that we're collecting the evidence of what's happening on the ground and feeding that back upwards. 3.2, create and maximize family literacy strategies that meet local needs and get the most value from funding. Because of course, like, it's very much what's going on in your own community. You know, somewhere in the heart of Dublin is going to be very different from where I am in rural Kerry, and the guidelines really acknowledge that there's a real recognition of the importance of this. I think the rapid collaborative response during COVID again really showed how when people are working together, we can meet these needs, and also highlighted the importance of the relationship of family literacy providers. And that's from the ETBs, the schools, the homeschool community liaison officers and others. And I suppose thinking about who's working directly with families, childcare workers, you know, outside the box, is there a way of reaching parents who are doing apprenticeship courses? So just really thinking about the best way we can all come together. But again, you need someone to actually hold all that in place. And again, it's about having the time and resources. That was something that was just coming at us, of course, all the time and these workshops. Now, 3.3, ensure that there are sufficient learner supports. And of course, again, it's challenging. One of the insights, you know, challenging to provide practical supports, childcare, transport, especially in rural areas, or engagement cost cover. So I think with COVID, there was again a very good response. And Toni, you were mentioning this earlier about tablets being provided. There was also a lot of ETBs were doing short videos to support parents in homeschooling and that. So there was a lot of innovative and creative supports for learners put in place. And just really what was happening in the ground was amazing, the work that people were doing. 3.4, ensure that there are sufficient tutor supports. And as Toni mentioned at the very start of the presentation, this is one really, it's quite an emotive one, because I think often as practitioners, we're working in isolation and can sometimes feel we're lacking some supports. And this can be, I suppose, an organizational issue. We did think it was interesting, though, that was coming through in the workshops that during COVID and with the move to online, rather than feeling more isolated, some tutors actually felt better supported, and that they were getting more of a chance to connect with colleagues from different parts of the county, things like that, and they'd more access to training online, because the reports really highlight that tutors want CPD, they want to be availing of these resources. So just having an opportunity for that is really important. On the flip side, like, we are all worn out at the moment, people are tired. And if there are people leaving, and when that happens, institutional memory is lost, relationships that people may have built up. So a family learning champion, you know, who's a tutor leaves, and that's lost. So there's a definite loss to the sector with that as well. So that is a really important area. And it's something that's touched on as well in the new literacy strategy as well, about supporting practitioners more. Then 3.5, ensure reliable data is gathered in a user-friendly way. And again, this was one that elicited quite a lot of strong emotions, we found, you know, within the workshops, because you've got the unfriendly, almost, if that's the correct term, PLSS system. So that's there, and it's alongside then the learner-centered quantitative and qualitative evaluations being developed internally and at a ground level. So there's this almost tug going on, but also what's happening with the data gathered. And again, I think this ties in with the whole thing of policy. People were a bit unsure of, hang on, where are these evaluations going when I pass them up along the line? What's happening with them? And I think there needs to be more clarity about that, because a lot of important learning and a lot of the transformative learning that's happening, and things that are happening, and you know, breaking cycles of intergenerational poverty and unmet literacy needs, that's actually being lost and falling between the cracks, because people are overstretched, don't have time, aren't sure where all this is going. So again, that is something that there needs to be a bit more work on, and I think a bit more clarity around, because people are very committed to it. And just to say again, Limerick Clare ETB shared great resources about capturing qualitative data as well as the quantitative data. So we shared that at a few of the workshops as well. Toni, there's nothing there, really, nothing else there about any of the guidelines that you want to mention, or?
No, I don't think, I think just what you said there, and it was kind of one of the bits that I covered as well, the whole data thing. I know it's not something any of us are mad about collecting the data on that, but it is very much, again, as I said earlier, and it came through a lot during the workshops we gave, that if we don't get that data together and pass it up and make sure it gets to those who are making the decisions, then we're just going to be sitting on the ground taking whatever somebody else decides. And that's just something that's out there, I suppose. Something none of us are happy with, but it's something we need to do. We really need to get out there, and you know, we're the experts. Well, family learning people, you're the experts, I should say. So gather the data, feed it up, and then maybe have the option to influence the policy that's coming down to us. So that's pretty much it, Eleanor.
So what we were going to do now is put you into breakout groups for, we would say 10 minutes, Toni, I think is enough. 10 minutes. And what we just want you to do is consider the following. What is resonating with you from the guidelines and the gathered insights around them? Are they relevant for your local area, for your context? Anything that strikes you about what you've heard? I suppose, just to stress, it's about creating a space for you to talk with colleagues from across the country about what is happening with family literacy in your area, and any of these that are jumping out at you. Now, we are really interested in hearing your feedback, because actually this is our final workshop based on the guidelines, and we will be feeding this into a report that will be going to Solace and may have a chance at influencing some of the things that are happening. So we're asking you can you please nominate one person to feed back the information? That's important. And I know we're like, it's a bit sometimes first thing in the morning, but really it is really valuable, because as I said, we will be putting this into a report for Solace, and you know, the findings from people and practitioners who are working directly in this area are what this project is about. So we would appreciate it. Thank you.
Veronica's waiting to come in, I think. Okay, back everybody, and thank you for that. So what we'll do at this stage is we have 3 breakout groups. And what I'll do is, the first question we had was what resonated from the guidelines, and do they have any relevance for your centre? So maybe if we call on group 1, who was Carol, Linda, May, Nora and Sharon, whichever of you is going to feed back, maybe you could give us some feedback on that, and then we could go to the other 2 groups and ask them what it was, do they have anything else, anything more on that one. So as I say, group 1, Carol, Linda, Mary, Nora and Sharon, which of you is going to feed back?
It's really over to you now, and over to your experience as well, guys.
So did you nominate somebody to feedback, or did you kind of just get too caught up in the chat?
Too much chat, I think.
Right, what did you chat about?
What kind of things were jumping out at you, or you know, what kind of things about the family literacy in your area? Did anything resonate with you from the guidelines? Or
I suppose we were coming at it from the point of view of, like I was saying, I'm a parent, and like I would never have thought during homeschooling to go back at all, really, to be honest, near the ETB or NALA. And I was just following from the schools. So we were just saying maybe there's a little bit of a missing link between what is being done on the ground and maybe the schools, if they were able to send your message further out, because it certainly never would have occurred to me to even think about. And you were saying like there was so much, you know, brilliant work done on the ground by people over lockdowns and COVID and that, and it just it wouldn't have occurred to me to even check there.
And Nora, that's really interesting.
ETBs, is it?
Yeah.
Sorry, Eleanor.
Yeah, to go back near like the ETBs or NALA, like you were saying, there was people kind of making programs and things like that over COVID, that there was, you know, great work being done there, and it wouldn't have occurred to me for literacy to go back that way.
That's a very interesting thing. Does anybody else find that? Because that is something that has come up a few times, that the schools don't seem to know what the literacy service or the ETBs are doing family literacy wise. Does anybody else have any?
We were talking about that. There is a bit of a disconnect, it seems, between the schools and the service we provide. Now, I was saying I sent out an email with a mail shot and nice poster and something that could be passed on to parents as well if they need help with maths, that we have tutors, and with a direct link to the maths tutor. And so far only one school responded back to say they got it, and the rest of the schools
didn't even acknowledge it.
Didn't even acknowledge it. So far nothing. But Mary just was saying to me, and it was good advice, to maybe contact the homeschool liaison person directly, because obviously principals might be too busy or whatever to sometimes get through the emails, or so we don't know if information gets disseminated as good as we would like it to be. So that little link that could be just sent out, I said, could you send it out in your next email? Just add the attachment. And so far there's nothing. Like, I haven't had any acknowledgements at all, really.
And we really found that the guidelines that, you know, people were really saying it was actually the homeschool community liaison officer, as you were saying there, Linda. They were a real conduit between the ETBs and the schools, because I think there's a real lack of awareness of the flexibility of the ETBs and how we design totally learner-centered programs. And look, give us a theme and we're up and running, you know, and that's very new to the schools, because they'd have a more fixed curriculum sometimes than we would. And just knowing that that's available can make a big difference. Yeah.
Somebody did suggest at one of our workshops that it might be a good idea, and now not everybody might have the expertise for this, so I'm just saying that it might be a good idea to make a short video and send it to the schools about
what you do.
What you do. And you're new in your role. How are things going with you down?
To be honest, Toni, I haven't engaged with family learning at all. I mean, I really appreciate these sessions because I'm learning from everybody else involved and from you. But it won't be till January till somebody else will come on board with me. It's very under-resourced here. So I was hoping to work with the schools, but because they're not engaging at the moment in family learning, I haven't had the time to try and go outside of that.
And are they not engaging at all, or is it?
No, they're not engaging. No, they just said that it's not a good time with COVID and the whole lot to explore anything. Yeah. So I'm afraid family learning hasn't happened. I came here 8 months ago and it hasn't happened in the last 8 months.
Oh, that's a pity.
It is a pity because I was involved in it in LCETB, all right. And it was working well there. But there were a lot more resources in LCETB now, a huge amount of staff and money was devoted towards family learning. So that's the difference.
That's the resources staff.
Down since
sorry, Toni, I missed that.
I'm just saying, does that resonate with anybody else? The idea that kind of family learning has gone off the boil or has shut down over the past. Lillian, are you suggesting? If you unmute yourself there, please.
Yeah, in our breakout room, we discussed this as well. I actually was saying I was surprised that in your presentation, you were saying you found a lot of positivity around family learning during COVID, that there was a lot of, some tutors felt more supported because they were online in Tipperary and South Tipperary here, because the majority of our family learning programs are through schools. It just fell off a cliff. We had no engagement at all. We've started back recently. Again, it's totally dependent, and we spoke about this in our breakout as well. The importance of working with other agencies, interagencies. Do you know, the homeschool liaison teacher or the homeschool liaison is vital for us. Because they do the recruiting. They know the parents who are most suited to our courses. And in fairness, we have built up a relationship with a few schools. But for other schools where there is no homeschool liaison teacher, you're totally dependent on the principal, who in rural schools probably is a teacher as well, doesn't have time. And going back to what I think Linda said about sending emails out and flyers out, that never worked for us, ever. You have to have face-to-face contact with the homeschool liaison teacher to actually talk to the homeschool liaison teacher. And in fairness to the homeschool liaison teacher, they have to have face-to-face contact with the parents. Sending out flyers in school bags doesn't work either. You really have to go out into the playground at 9 o'clock in the morning and catch them and bring them in. But once they're in, we fly along. It's just that initial engagement. It's just really the importance of working with other agencies, that's vital. That's our experience anyway, in South Tipperary.
It's just that is kind of, to a great extent, this idea that family learning has, as you say, Lillian, fallen off a cliff over the past while. It's not something that we encountered over the past couple. Now, we haven't really, Eleanor, we haven't.
Well, I don't know, Toni, that being said, one thing we did encounter is that family literacy is so different. Like all the ETBs are independent of each other. I think it's got a very mixed profile, and it depends where you are, and it depends who's championing it for you, and if there's time, and as Ed was saying, if the resources are there and there's support.
Oh yeah, but I'm just thinking that the schools are kind of backed off.
Well, Toni, currently now they can't even get teachers at the moment. It's a disaster for schools. They're under severe pressure. And
is anybody else finding that in any of the other areas or in any of the other breakout rooms? Did anybody kind of come up with that?
Yeah, can I just say, in Roscommon, I work in Roscommon, and it's not about the teachers. I know it's very important to get the principals and homeschool liaisons on board, but the other agencies, TUSLA, the FRCs, the library services.
Who's the FRCs?
The Family Resource Centres.
Thank you.
Right. And we have 4 of them in the county, and I have found that by liaising with them, we holistically we can not, you know, we can approach the parents and those hard to reach people, you know.
Mhm.
And so if referrals come in from Tusla, they come in from the school, word of mouth generally gets out then, and people start looking for them as well themselves.
The word of mouth is key,
Yeah.
really, with the
Yeah,
parents
isn't it?
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you do need the interagency. It's it's key to success in family learning.
Yeah. And
Definitely.
the support needs to be there at organizational level
It
for
does.
that, like, doesn't it? You
It
don't
does,
have
yeah.
that. Yeah.
You know, and I mean, Tusla, the family resource centres, they all have access to families, you know, so they're key in being involved.
And are they enthusiastic about being involved?
Oh, very, yes, very. I find they are, yeah. It takes a while to build up the relationship, but you know, going with the program, one of the programs that came about in lockdown, which was very successful for us, was the little cookbook. I think I mentioned it, Toni, on a previous webinar. The community cookbook, where it was the international language of food, brought people together, you know, from all nationalities. And it's amazing, that meant so much. Some of the feedback we got on that, you know, it changed people's lives by getting involved in that project. So we only had about 40 throughout the whole county that actually submitted a recipe. I'd say about 60 got involved initially, 60 submitted a recipe, which has been printed in a book now. And once we have the launch, I will be sharing it with all of you.
Oh, lovely. Thank you. That would be
that's
wonderful.
fantastic.
But it did bring people together. It got everybody involved. They're all looking forward to getting their book and their little plaque, you know. It's an exciting time. And it makes a difference to families, you know, because the parents even involve the kids in some of the recipes.
Oh, very good. So did anybody else, now 1 minute we were saying with Ed and Lillian that nothing was happening, and now Irene's being very positive. Does anybody else have any wonderful positivity to report?
Did we get to what we didn't have? Did we leave any of the groups out there? Sorry, just in case after saying to everyone, make sure you're not.
No, we had 8. Well, we had 8 from one other group, and we had the group with Annette, Deirdre, Fidelma, and Neff.
Don't want to be leaving anyone out.
Yes, we kind of had much of the hi everyone, it's Deirdre here. We kind of had a lot of the same feedback about, I suppose, not really on the positive side, more so on the negative side, about feedback from my own case. It was kind of like the homeschool liaisons officer. Yes, I have one that has been over enthusiastic and so helpful, whereas the rest I'm kind of waiting to hear back. And like, although be it positive interactions, when I do get a chance to talk to them, they're kind of swamped really as well, I suppose. And COVID again, and you know, what about the numbers? Really, we don't have much engagement. People we don't find engagement great. We're trying to get so many things for parents to engage in. But I suppose again, they are the strong link, like having like you said, the agencies really will be kind of key to getting it off the ground, I suppose, for our own sake, for our own side, really.
Totally, yeah. But I mean, the schools are so strong. I think at the moment as well, they're practically in crisis at the moment, you know, with the way numbers are going and trying. I know my son's school, like they're just scratching around trying to find substitutes at the moment.
And a lot have said that it's just everything is so kind of chaotic for them, and there's a lot of stress, and the Leaving Certs are so stressed. And you know, I suppose in that regard, it is a bit more kind of negative rather than positive. But hopefully now the new year, and you know, get a plan in place for the new year. And
you know, it's hard. Everyone's very tired, all right, at the moment. Yeah. And even that's what I was saying earlier. I'm so appreciative of you all coming today as well, because I know it's like, oh, at the moment, yeah.
Could I just add something there, if you don't mind?
Please do.
Yes,
okay, so I'm a homeschool liaison down on the Cork Limerick border, and you know, there is a huge literacy issue in our area, and one of the biggest barriers to education for my group of parents with the ETB is that there is no childcare for them. Do you know what I mean? Like if there was, I often said, if there was some kind of a childcare course or something going on that their children could be safe in a room for an hour and a half while the parents were doing something together. You know, it would do an awful lot as regards social isolation, you know, language barriers. It would do an awful lot as regards community development, and certainly assisting the people that we're aiming for. But that's probably one of the biggest in my area, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who has that issue.
I would imagine you're not, because it certainly seems to have gone backwards. I know, like in my day, way back in the dark ages, it was, you know, no class without creche, and even you're falling down places. When I worked in Dundrum, and that we always had a creche. It mightn't have been the greatest thing ever, but there was always a space where there were 2 people that could look, you know, trained people that would look after the children. But they've all gone. The funding for that has been completely pulled. I'm not aware of any place now where there's a creche that you can, you know, that can be on site, and that you can run a course and have somebody look after the children. It is a big issue, but again, it's something I suppose we need to make a note of ourselves, Eleanor, for
thanks in it. That's really, really good feedback to have. And it's really important. And I mean that the childcare and the transport as well for parents in rural areas, like they were identified in the guidelines, you know, as learner supports that were really needed. But yes, again, challenging because lack of resources and everything. But you know, when you hear then stories like Irene, you know, saying, you know, it's changing people's lives, you know, so that's why we need to push as well. Yeah,
keeps giving us hope that even though we hear the bad things, that the good things are happening, and they can happen, I suppose, is the other side of it. No, Eleanor, I'm very conscious of time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, to be honest, I suppose just one thing to share is just the mention of family literacy in the new adult, the 10-year adult literacy strategy. But I mean, other than that, I think we're pretty good for time and that. So I'll just pop that up there now for us.
Right.
I suppose, these are our key learnings along the way, but we've been discussing them. And what I'll do is that Fergus, we're very happy if Fergus wants to share this PowerPoint, if he doesn't mind, that you've the information all in one place. But I mean, there needs to be a commitment at an organizational level. And when you have that support, and especially an AO championing things, it really makes a very big difference for the family literacy. But just, I suppose, going forward, hopefully there seems to be a commitment to growing family literacy within the new 10-year strategy. So you can just see it's there, it's on page 61. I know probably people have had a look at this already, but I definitely would recommend, again, we were saying that the way we can be buffeted around by policy when we're working on the ground, and the way our learners can be buffeted around. I'd recommend having a read of that just to see what's happening and the plan, and hopefully some of the new things that are going to be coming along the way in the literacy support landscape. So, but I think that's the main thing from us now, and thank you. We really appreciate your feedback and your insights as well. So thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Toni and Eleanor. That was fantastic, and you were great at drawing out people for their feedback and their input. So I think that made it really worthwhile. So just thanks to Toni and Eleanor for putting great effort into the presentation and the webinar, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. And
thank you so much.
Toni and Eleanor will send me their presentation and I'll forward it on to everybody. So, and then next week we should have this edited and we have it up on the NALA YouTube channel if you missed anything today. Okay, thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Thanks
Thank
so
you, Fergus.
much.
Thanks everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.